Hello everybody, welcome back to High Ground. My name is Tanner and today we're going to be taking a look at something a little bit different. Although longtime viewers might remember this, we're going to be talking about Infamy drafts. So Infamy is a free-to-play fantasy system currently around professional Rainbow Six Siege, Valorant, and Overwatch. You pick a map, some players, and a team that you think will do well over the course of an event. Everything has their own costs, so that is the big limiting factor. You can't just pick any 5 players and whatever team. You do have to consider the costs. The roster that earns the most points win. For this video, we're just going to be talking about the first portion of Six Invitational 2025. So it's split up between groups and bracket. We're just going to be covering groups. But again, there will be a second event opening up for bracket after groups ends. You have up until the first matches start on February 3rd to submit and or change up your team. And then how to enter, it's pretty simple. We're going to use the website to create a team, and then we'll copy it and we're going to paste it into Discord, drop a little emoji, and then everything should be taken care of. I'll walk you through the process, so we'll get into it a little bit more as we go through. So here are the official rules. I don't want to cover everything here. Feel free to pause the video or to navigate here on your own. I'll link the website in the description as well as the Discord to make it a little bit easier to get there. So basically the way it works, 5 pros, 1 team, 1 map. The map doesn't have a cost associated with it, so your $120 salary only needs to cover the 5 pros and the 1 team. And the costs, they are sort of meant to represent recent performances, but there are still going to be some that really jump out to you as, wow, I think that's going to be a really good value pick, or wow, that is really overpriced. Whatever the case, take advantage of it as best you can. You have no restriction besides the salary. You can pick any combination of players from teams, regions, whatever you want to do. You don't get any sort of a bonus for picking players from the team that you pick. It's all separate. In addition to picking 5 players, you need to designate one of those 5 as your entry player and one of those 5 as your support player. Your entry player gets a 50% bonus to their entry stats, i.e. their first kills and their first deaths. That is multiplying the bonus you get for kills as well as the points that you lose for deaths. We'll look at the exact numbers you get for all of these things in just a second. You might not want to pick somebody just because they're going to get in a ton of entry engagements if you think they're going to go heavily negative, but even if you go even, you're getting a lot more points than you're losing. And then for support, just a 2 times multiplier to plant stats. For the teams, you're just going to pick a team. Again, these do have costs associated with them, so you have to take that into account. And for each round that a team wins, you get a certain number of points. For each round that the teams lose, you'll lose a certain number of points. Keep in mind, in the group stage, all teams will play the same number of series. They'll play 4 series, but they can play anywhere from 8 to 12 maps because they're playing best of 3s. And then for the map, you're just going to pick one of the 9 maps and you'll get some points for every time it gets played. So just pick a map you think is going to be played a lot and you should be good. I think we covered pretty much everything. Again, no reward for saving your money. You can spend exactly 120 if you want, but you're not penalized or rewarded for spending less or exactly a certain amount of money. So the scoring, 10 points for a kill, -6 points for a death, 5 points for an entry kill, aka a first kill, -2 points for a first death, 10 points for a clutch, i.e. 1vx, 10 points for a plant, and then stage points. This shouldn't be applicable to the group stage. I assume it will be for bracket, but because we're just talking about groups, this won't matter here. This is just when teams and or players skip over a round because they advance through the upper bracket, but again, that doesn't apply to the group stage. For round wins, you get plus 18 points. For round losses, -12 points. And for each time a map is picked, you get 10 points. Most of these things say kill or death, so that is generally what you're going to want to look for. Players that are going to get a lot of kills and ideally not get a lot of deaths, but even if they get a lot of deaths, kills heavily outweigh deaths, especially entry kills versus entry deaths. It is a 2.5 times difference. Like you lose 2 points, but you gain 5 points for an entry kill. So like I was saying earlier, it is advisable to pick players you think will get in a ton of entry engagements, even if they don't necessarily have the best entry ratio. Okay, that does it for the rules. Let's now hop over to creating a team. Okay, let's start with players. Maybe I'll jump around a little bit because we are keeping in mind our $120 budget. I've already more or less picked who I want, but let's sort of go down the list and talk about who might be some good picks. For G2, they're all relatively cheap. Everyone's below the average price that you're going to be spending of $20 per unit. Alamau's the most expensive. He's pretty consistent, usually statistically. But if I was going to pick somebody from G2, it'd probably be Doki or Loira. They are pretty likely to get a good number of frags if anybody does on the team, and they are very cheap at $12 and $14. Team Joel, I think the one that catches my eye the most is Reaps. Yes, he is by far the most expensive player, but if somebody's going to put up crazy numbers on the team, it's almost always Reaps, even if he costs more than anybody. He's the one I'd go with. On M80, these guys are all really cheap outside of Spoit, so if you think Spoit's going to go crazy this event, maybe you think he's worth the $24, but maybe you're really happy with Packer as a budget pick. Maybe you throw him on your support. But spoiler, I'm probably just going to throw a random player on support and not pick up a proper support player. I think that's usually the correct thing to do with this format. Diffuser, Gunner, Kino, they're all similarly priced. I think Diffuser has pretty good potential, but Gunner at $15 seems like a steal. He is the Manchester Major MVP. Yes, he wasn't at the last two events in Esports World Cup and Montreal, but still, the most recent international event he did attend, he was the best player clearly, so he's a really solid pickup. Depending on how you think this group is going to play out, I think he's perhaps one of the easiest players to pick up. And then on Liquid, these guys are all really expensive outside of Lagonis, so they're not super enticing for me. If I was going to pick one, maybe Maya, but $28 is a lot. Lagonis is pretty cheap at 15, but he usually has awful stats, so I certainly wouldn't pick Lagonis. Unwanted, these guys are mega cheap, and I'm going to actually pick up my first player. I'm going to get Gaveni. I think at $13, he is a phenomenal budget pick. Maybe I'll switch him out. We'll see. We'll see how I'm feeling by the end. Adam, Dream, Hot and Cold Spirits, if you think any of these guys are going to pop off, you could potentially pick them up. But I feel like Gaveni is the most likely to put up a good performance as far as getting me points. Cyclops, I cannot pick up any of these guys because of their history and also because they are in pretty much what everyone agrees is the hardest group. The other four teams are probably going to lay waste to them, but I mean, if you're a huge Cyclops enjoyer, maybe you got to pick them up. They're not the most expensive, but I feel like they could be even cheaper given the circumstances. Then we have the FaZe players. These guys are all very expensive. FaZe, undoubtedly one of the best teams coming into the event, and that's really reflected in their players' prices. I don't know, Vidaking should cost $32. Yes, he has put up really good stats lately, but I feel like it's unlikely for that to continue given his roles and everything. I feel like it's going to be another FaZe player that takes over, but who knows, maybe he will continue this streak he's been on. Furia, these guys are really cheap. These guys are the reigning world champions. They did miss out on the last event, but 2 events before that, they were still pretty reasonable. JV and KZ, obviously a lot more expensive. Felopox and Nade, they're the 2 support players on the team. I'm not too enticed to pick them up, but Herds at $14 is a steal. I don't think I can pass up on. It's entirely possible this does not go well for Furia, for Herds. They are in a really tough group. I would have even more faith if they were in an easier group, but it's hard to bet against these guys. Then we have Secret, and some of these guys are a little bit cheap, some are a little bit expensive. Joom is the most expensive. He's probably the one I would pick up if I was going to pick up anybody, but they're in a tough group as well. They are in the same group here. None of them jump out to me as players that I want to pick up. Ambi is also pretty expensive at $25. He's probably the one I'd go for on, they're now Shopify, formerly Sonics. I'm not super confident in these guys at this price point. I used to pick Grixer like every event. He would put up like crazy stats every time. He was like the best pick ever, but things have kind of changed these days. Then we have BDS, and this is what I'm most excited to pick because not only are they a phenomenal team, but of all the phenomenal teams, probably most people would say that FaZe, W7M, and them are the 3 favorites coming into the event. They have pretty clearly, I think, the easiest group. W7M is in Group D, that's probably the second hardest group. FaZe is in Group B, probably the hardest group. And then we have BDS, and if you remove them from the group, the average sort of really plummets. They get to play against Dark Zero, Falcons, who might put up a good fight, and then the other guys probably a little bit less so. They are very expensive, but again, given how good they are and the group that they're in, I'm really enticed. And I think I'm going to go with Shaiko. He hasn't been the insane monster this year that he was in the past because he has a lot more competition on his team, but he's still Shaiko, hard to bet against him. I'm going to get him. I'm going to put him as my entry, and maybe I'll regret it, but more than likely I will not. Maybe I'll even come back and pick up another one of these guys, but they are pretty expensive. It is tough. Maybe I'll be back though. Bolo, Kobilax, Nafe, NJR, Pambazoo. These guys are all pretty expensive on average. Kobilax is a little bit cheap. He's probably the one I'd get, if anybody. Maybe NJR. I'm just not feeling super confident regarding Dark Zero after their last international event, maybe if they were a little bit cheaper. And then we have Falcons. They're sort of the opposite, where they're relatively cheap. Robbie is above 20, but everyone else is below. And they were really good in Montreal. They made a pretty deep run. They even beat Dark Zero, but I'm not confident that they'll be able to do it again. And for that reason, I'm going to shy away from them. Talon, I would go with Yas here if I was going to get anybody. These guys are really cheap. If you think that they are underrated, there could be a good pickup here. Raza Company, I think Baseto is the cheapest player in the entire tournament. So if you really want to get a lot of really expensive guys and you need to just fill with a player, he's probably the guy to do it. Oxygen, these guys are also really cheap. I think Hat, it's got to be like the second cheapest player. I don't know if I've seen another single digit player. Maybe I forgot about one. If you have more than $1 more faith in Hat than Baseto, maybe you go with him instead. I feel like that's probably a better pick. I think Newers is the one I would pick on this team. And in fact, I am picking Newers. This is a little bit of an underdog pick, picking anybody on Oxygen given the year or even 2 years that they've had recently. But Newers back on LAN. I of course want to get some more NA players on my team. But spoiler, that's going to be the last one. Then we have Scars and, and Rec. They have proven themselves to be forces internationally, but I mean, they just didn't look very good last time. If you think one of them is going to do really well, they could be decent picks. Nina is a little bit expensive at 21 though. Ashen has been pretty phenomenal lately. Benja and Jano, probably the other two. Forrest and Fultz, they might be a little bit too expensive for how they've played and sort of how they've been inconsistent lately. And also they're just not the main fraggers on the team, and that is really what I lean towards in this format. I'd be happy enough to pick up one of them, but that's just not the route I end up going. On Virtus Pro, it's tough to pick up any of these guys because they usually all have pretty reasonable stats, but usually nobody has crazy stats. I think probably Dan is the one that has stood out the most, but it certainly has been Pasha recently. That's why he's $26. So you probably can't go wrong with either of them. I just don't know if they'll 100% justify the price tag. And then finally, we have W7M, reigning major champions, not world champions, although I guess the org is both the reigning major champion and world champion. Dash is, he's relatively cheap. Dots is right at 20, but I certainly wouldn't pick up either of them. I think Dodez or Lobin, if you're a big believer in either of them, they're fine at their price. Volps, I mean, if you think he's going to pop off, I guess, but $32 is pretty tough to justify. So yeah, I got these four and I have $45 left. So let me go grab my other things and we'll come back for the last player. So let's get my team. I'm going to save a little bit here. I could kind of go cheap on my last player and get a really strong team, or I could do the opposite. I think I'm going to go with a little bit of a budget pick. I'm going to go with Furia, and this is kind of bold because, again, I did say that they are in a really tough group, but I do just kind of want a budget pick. I'm going to favor my players a little bit more and say that these guys will at least do okay and not cost me a bunch of points. Maybe this will be foolish if, like, FaZe or somebody absolutely demolishes the group, but FaZe are $30, so sort of hard to justify the price tag there. For maps, I'm just gonna go with Clubhouse. Like it's just sort of a shot in the dark. Oh, I actually already have it on here. Yeah, so I'll just re-add it for the sake of doing so. And finally, players. I have $29. I did actually do this in a way that I have Goveni from Group A, I have Herds from Group B, I have Shaiko from Group C, and I have Newers from Group D, so it's sort of split up. But I do obviously have to overlap now. I cannot pick another player from another group because there are no other group. I want one more BDS player. As I said before, I feel like there's the biggest disparity between them and the rest of their group, more so than that is true of any other team. I'm gonna get, I have 29. I can't quite afford uses. He's like the most expensive player in the event because I think he has like the best stats in the world over the course of the last year or so. I'm gonna get a Leakafac, I guess. I think Solotov's also reasonable. Leakafac was really, really good in Manchester and has generally been pretty good overall. I'm going to put him as my support. I don't know that anybody else would necessarily be better. Maybe somebody pulls off a few plants more than him, but I don't expect anyone on my list to be getting a lot of plants, so I don't think it too much matters. So that does it for my team. I just hit create here, and then it gives me this text. I'm just going to hit copy, and then we're going to switch over to Discord. If you do want to get over to Discord, if you don't already have the server, I think you can click here, you can click here. I don't know exactly what's going to happen if you don't have it. I assume it's just going to say, do you want to join the server? And then you join it. But do keep in mind there are multiple ways to get to Discord from this website. So now here we are in the Fantasy R6 channel on the Infamy server. So again, make sure you're in the right channel on the right server. And I already have this copied to my clipboard. So I'm just going to paste it here and press enter. Let me add the robot. Yeah, just going to add the robot. You can see somebody up here. Yeah, so there's like the robot here, and that's the one that you add. And then once your team gets submitted into the system, they are going to add the check mark. I got it in before the deadline, so it will go in. Again, my picks were Goveni, Herds, Newers, Shaiko, Leakafac as my players, Furia as my team, Clubhouse as my map. I would advise you to not copy me entirely. It's not like you get anything for winning. It's not like the Ubisoft prediction thing. So to make things more fun, please change at least one thing if you want to mostly use my team, because it just doesn't seem very fun if we have the exact same team. But anyways, I think that's going to do it for me. If you have any questions or comments or whatever, feel free to leave them below. I or somebody else will try to help you out, but I think it's mostly self-explanatory. I will catch you guys next time.